Welcome back. In these next few videos, we will review the common annotation tools in AutoCAD, namely text, dimensions, and leaders. These tools are found in the Annotation panel on the Home tab of the ribbon and also in the Annotation tab of the ribbon. These annotations of text, dimensions, and leaders are the parts of our drawing presentations that clearly describe and define our designs and models. Without these descriptive elements applied to the drawings we produce, our drawings lack meaning and context. There is one very special tool in AutoCAD that the user can utilize to maximize ease of use and the power of the tools available within the software. This tool is known as annotative scaling. As we have discussed previously, we draw everything that we are designing or modeling in model space at its true size, that is to say, at a 1:1 scale. Yet, at the end of the day, we need to show all of the important parts, pieces, and components of our design and model in a printed format. In this printed format, these objects are displayed at some specific drawing scale factor. Not only do annotations need to be legible and of proper size on the printed page, but they also need to be legible and of a proper size in model space drawing environment. Annotative scaling is a tool or mechanism that manages the proper display of our drawing annotations. Whereas annotative scaling is the mechanism that controls or manages the visual sizing or resizing of annotative objects, the drawing scale at which our objects are displayed on the printed page is assigned to viewports, also known as viewport windows, and are an integral part of our page layouts. We access our page or paper layouts via the Layout tabs at the lower left portion of our display. A viewport window can be described in several ways. The creation of a viewport window is equivalent to cutting a hole or window in our drawing paper, and through this hole or window we can see the objects and annotations we have created in model space. It is the drawing scale factor that the user assigns to this viewport window that allows the annotative scaling mechanism to properly adjust and resize visually any annotative objects that are displayed. My drawing file, so that we may continue developing our personal drawing template file. To simplify our drawing environment, delete or erase all existing objects by typing Ctrl-A to initiate the Select All command, and then type E for the Erase command and hit the Enter key, or simply hit the Delete key, and save your drawing. On the Home tab of the ribbon and in the Annotation panel, there is an alpha character capital A with the word text below it, as well as a pull-down arrow. By left-clicking on the capital A alpha character will invoke the current or last used text creation method command. By selecting on the pull-down arrow, we see the two methods of creating text objects in AutoCAD. One method is via the Mtext or multi-line text command. Mtext is paragraphical in nature. The other method is via the text command, also referred to as single-line text. The user may create a series of returned lines of text with this command, yet each returned line of the text is a singular standalone object. Back in our first video, in a review of the AutoCAD user interface, we briefly visited the location down in the Drawing Aids toolbar where the user accesses changing the current annotation scale setting. We see that the current setting is at 1:1. This tells us that any annotative object created from this point forward will be assigned an annotative scale of 1 to 1. By selecting on the pull-down arrow next to this 1 to 1 text, we are presented with a contextual menu of the current industry standard drawing scales for engineering, civil, as well as architectural and mechanical design units. For the moment, we will leave the current annotation scale set to 1 to 1. Enter the Mtext command either by clicking on the Mtext icon in the annotation panel or by typing Mtext in the command line and hitting the Enter key. Since our annotation scale setting is currently set at 1 to 1, a warning dialog box pops up stating you are creating an annotative object. Set the annotation scale to the scale at which the annotation is intended to display. We will continue to use the scale of 1 to 1, but we do see that in the pull down we can access the breadth of scales that are standard to the AEC industries. The reasoning for this warning dialog will become evident in just a bit. And we will click OK to accept the warning and move on. In the command line, we are presented with the prompt to specify the first corner of the text box that we wish to create our text object. So that we know where to find this text object, in the command line type 0, 0 and hit the Enter key. This will anchor our text at the coordinate point 0, 0 in model space. The command line then prompts to specify the opposite corner of this text box. We also see several options available to use in the squared brackets. In this instance, let's type in the command line the @ symbol. Recalling from our previous video, the @ symbol in English words is saying from where I started go, and from where we have started is the coordinate point 0, 0, followed by 2, -1, and hit the Enter key. We have just created a text box that is 2 units wide and 1 unit tall in the -y direction. The user is now presented with a typical text-ruled text box with a blinking cursor, and in this text box, type, in capital letters, the word text. To exit the Mtext command, the user can click on the OK icon in the text formatting toolbar, or to double left click anywhere outside of the text box. If the user hits the escape key, we are presented with a dialog box asking whether we want to save any of our text changes that have been made. By selecting Yes in this dialog box, we will save and close the text editor. Selecting No will close the text editor without saving the text, and selecting Cancel will return the user back to continuing typing within the text editor. I will double-click outside of the text box to close the text editor. Once you have saved the text change and exited the Mtext command, type Z and Enter to initiate the zoom command, and then E for extents and hit the Enter key. Provided all other drawing elements were successfully erased earlier, the user's display should zoom in on the newly created text object. If you did not see the text editor toolbar when creating this text object, in the command line type Mtext toolbar and hit enter. The command line prompts the user to enter a new value for the Mtext toolbar setting. Type 1 and hit enter to change the setting to display the Mtext formatting toolbar anytime you enter the text formatting mode for Mtext. Save your drawing. Select this text object either by left-clicking one time on the text or selecting the text with a pick window. Examine the properties of this text object in the Properties panel. Note at the top of the Properties panel, it states that this object is a piece of Mtext. It is living on the 0 layer. Down in the Text section of the Properties panel, it states that the text style is standard. It is justified at the top left. That is, the location where the single grip and text anchor is currently located. Further down in the text height section, we note that the height is a number different from the height of the text we wish it to be. Left-click one time in the text height numerical value window and change the height to be 3/32 of an inch, and press enter to accept this value. Note that the text height in your display changed size. Left-click one time anywhere in model space to allow the Properties panel to hide, and hit the Escape key a couple times to deselect the text object, and save your drawing. To edit this piece of text, the user may select the text and, in the right-click contextual menu, choose Mtext Editor, or the user may simply double left-click on the text object. Either method will enter the Mtext Editor. At this point, the user has many of the standard options of editing and modifying this text object available in the text formatting toolbar. We also see in the top bar of the text formatting toolbar that the text height size displayed matches the height previously applied to this text object in the Properties palette. Recall that the current text style is set to standard in the Properties palette. We also see that current text style displayed here in the text formatting toolbox. This standard text style is not annotative, meaning that annotative scaling has no control over this specific text object based on the text style. We will not make any changes at this time. Click the OK button or double left click anywhere outside the text box in model space to exit the command. Next to the word annotation, in the annotation panel of the ribbon is a pull-down arrow. In this flyout panel is a convenient location to access the various style managers for text, dimensions, leaders, and tables. Note that each of the style manager icons has a little paintbrush on it, and we see that the out-of-the-box AutoCAD standard style is the current style set for each of these annotation types. By left-clicking one time on the text style pull-down arrow in the top row of this flyout panel, we see that there is a second text style available to us. This text style is titled Annotative and has this blue plane or spaceship-shaped icon next to it. This blue icon shape is the shape of an architect's or engineering scale in section. This icon signifies that this particular text style is set to be annotative, and by left-clicking one time on this annotative text style icon, toggles or switches it to be the current text style that will be used moving forward. Note that the label has now changed accordingly. Left-click one time on the Text Style Manager icon, the capital A with the paintbrush. This opens the Text Style Manager dialog box. We see in this dialog box the current text style is highlighted in blue. In the font area, we see that the current text style is set to Arial. We see a preview of this font down in the lower left-hand corner of the dialog box, and we see in the size area that the text checkbox next to the word annotative is checked. Let's create some new text styles. Left-click one time on the new icon at the right-hand side of the dialog box. The user is now prompted with a dialog to name the new text style. Name this new text style Roman S. Click OK, and in the Font Name pull-down, scroll down and choose Roman S as the current font type. In the preview, we see that this font style is very thin and linear. This is a commonly used font style, as even at very small font sizes, it remains easily legible. Note that this new font style displays in the Styles list. Click on the new icon again and select Yes when prompted to save the current style just created. Name the new style Stylus. Click OK, and in the Font Name pull-down, scroll down and choose Stylus BT as the font type. Note that this font style is moderately slender and has a mild artistic stroke to the lettering. At the bottom of the Text Style Manager dialog box, click Apply and then click Close. By checking in the Annotation panel, in the Annotation pull-down, and expanding the Text Style pull-down, we now see that our newly created text styles are available to be used. Save your drawing. Now we get into the fun part, also known as the mentally taxing part, of understanding how annotative scaling works on annotative objects. When an annotative object is created, it is currently assigned the annotative scale that is set in the Drawing Aids toolbar at the lower right corner of the display. The current setting, as noted previously, is 1:1, which means this text object is and will only display in model space at the 1:1 height value assigned to this text when created, which is 3/32 of an inch. The user may assign any number of annotative scales to a singular annotative object. Select this piece of text by any of the methods previously discussed. In the Properties palette and under the Text section, change the style from Standard by left-clicking one time on the bar next to the word Standard, and in the pull-down, change the font style to Roman S. Since this text style is annotative, By placing your cursor over the text object, the annotative symbol appears next to the cursor as a ghosted image. This is a visual cue telling the user that the selected object is an annotative object. To add additional annotative scales to this object, we can access the Annotative Scales dialog box by two paths. One is in the right-click contextual menu, clicking one time on the Annotative Object Scale pull-down, and left-clicking on Add Delete Scales. The other path is in the Properties palette. Under the Text section, we see that the current annotative scale is 1:1. By left-clicking one time on the bar next to this value, and left-clicking on the little dialog icon next to the right, this opens the Annotation Object Scale dialog box as well. Left-click on the Add tab, and a scale list of all the common engineering and architectural drawing scales is presented. Select all of the scales from 1/16 of an inch equals 1 foot down to 1 foot equals 1 foot, and click OK. We see that all these chosen scales have been added to the object scale list. And this list is specific to this text object, and click OK. Hit the Escape key a couple times to deselect this text object, and then reselect the text object. We are now presented in model space with a visual representation of the model space font heights for this text object for each of the scales that have been applied to it. One lesson to take away, to be acknowledged at this time, is to not over-assign annotative scales to objects, since doing so simply creates a visually graphic nightmare. Assigning only the annotative scales to be used on any given object is the best rule and method to follow. Hit the Escape key a few times to deselect this text object. We again only see the actual 1:1 annotative scale iteration in correlation to the annotative scale assigned in the Drawing Aids toolbar at the lower right of the display. Left-click one time on the Annotation Scale pull-down and change the current scale to 1 inch equals 1 foot, 0 inches, and note the graphic change in the font height. Select the text, and in the Properties palette, under the Text section, note that the paper text height states 3/32 of an inch, the actual height of the font when created as an annotative object, while the model space font height states that it is displaying at 1 1/8 inches. Also note that this 1 1/8 inches is grayed out and cannot be adjusted here in the Properties palette, although the paper text height is available to be changed. This is an example of how annotative scaling is adjusting the font height in model space so that it remains legible in model space for the user, while in a viewport window on a layout tab, which we will investigate shortly, will display at the 3/32 of an inch height assigned to this text. Select this text object and left-click one time on the annotation scale pull-down and explore changing this annotation scale to different scales assigned to this object and observe the various text height graphic changes in model space. Return the setting back to 1 inch equals 1 foot and save your drawing. At the bottom left of the display, left-click one time on the Layout 1 tab. The white area of this default layout is graphically representing a virtual 11-inch by 8.5-inch piece of paper. The gray area outside the white paper area can be thought of as a table surface this piece of paper is resting on. Just inside the outer boundaries of this virtual piece of paper are finely dashed lines. These dashed lines represent the printable boundaries or margins based on the physical limitations of the printer that is assigned to be used to print this virtual paper layout. These margins can be modified. In the center of this virtual piece of paper is a default viewport window. The viewport window frame in this instance is a rectangle, and through this viewport window or theoretical hole cut in this piece of paper, we can see our text object and the virtual drawing grid if it happens to be turned on. Left-click one time on the border of this viewport window frame to select it. Note the change in the drawing aids toolbar at the bottom right of the display. With this viewport frame selected, a few extra icons show up in the drawing aids toolbar. One is a small padlock that, when selected or turned on, prevents any changes in the scale factor assigned to this viewport window. It is always highly recommended that once the user's chosen objects are centered in a viewport window and the appropriate viewport scale is assigned, to lock the viewport window to prevent any undesired changes. Note that the current viewport scale factor is a seemingly random decimal factor. Before we play with adjusting this viewport scale factor, let's explore the viewport itself. Since what we are viewing in our viewport window is model space, we can essentially open the window and reach through and draw, create, and modify objects. We can do this by two methods. At the bottom of our display and at the left end of the drawing aids toolbar, we see the word paper. We can interpret this visual cue to mean that the viewport window is not open. Therefore, we are unable to draw, create, or modify objects in model space through the viewport window. Any object that we currently draw or create will be physically, virtually drawn on the paper itself. The often used term for this is called working or drawing in paper space on the paper. Left-clicking one time on this icon that reads paper, a few things happen. One is that the word paper changes to the word model. Our drawing aids toolbar icons from model space are displayed. The viewport frame becomes bold, and inside the viewport we see our view cube, and in the upper right corner all of the common model space display items. Left-clicking on the model paper space toggle in the drawing aids toolbar again returns us to the paper space environment. and the viewport window is essentially closed. We can also gain access into a viewport window by double left clicking inside of the viewport window frame. Likewise, we can return back to the paperspace environment by double left clicking outside of the viewport window frame. Navigate again into model space and use your scroll wheel to pan and zoom to center the existing text object in the viewport window, and then close the viewport window. Select the viewport window boundary, pull down the annotative scale list, and change the current scale to 1 inch equals 1 foot. The viewport zooms in or out accordingly to the correct scale value, and in this instance, only the annotative scale of 1 inch equals 1 foot 0 inches assigned to the text is displayed. Select the viewport window boundary again, pull down the annotative scale list, and change the viewport scale to 1/4 inch equals 1 foot 0 inches. Note that the viewport zoomed to the correct scale value, and in this instance, only the annotative scale of 1/4 inch equals 1 foot assigned to the text is displayed, yet visually, the displayed font height of the text remains constant at the height assigned to the text in the text editor. Let's proof this out a bit more. Select the viewport and erase or delete it. In the command line, type MV or MView for Make Viewport and hit Enter. We could follow the command prompt and draw our own viewport. Instead, at the far right end of the squared brackets, we can choose a number of viewports we wish the software to create for us. Either left-click on the number 4 or type 4 in the command line and hit Enter. Again, instead of following the prompt, note that the word fit is in a set of carets. Hit Enter, and the software generates 4 equal viewports within the printable boundary margins of our paper layout. Sequentially select individual viewports starting with the upper left and change the scale of each viewport first to 1/4 inch equals 1 foot. The second, change to 1 inch equals 1 foot. The third, change to 3 inches equals 1 foot. And the fourth, change to 6 inches equals 1 foot. Pan within each viewport as necessary to center the object, your text object. And if you zoom in or out by accident, go back and change the scale to the correct scale height. Once all of these scales have been individually set in each viewport and ensuring you are in paper space, select all 4 viewports. And in the Drawing Aids toolbar, left-click one time on the padlock icon. Save your drawing. The key takeaway here is that graphically, even though each viewport is zoomed in or out to different scale factors, and our virtual grid helps us to visually understand that concept, the annotative text displayed in each viewport remains constant at the assigned 3/32 of an inch text height. With these viewports locked, the user can now access model space within any of these viewports, and when using the scroll wheel to pan or zoom, the view within the viewports is fixed, and the pan and zoom actions are akin to moving the physical paper across the table surface or moving the physical paper closer to or farther away from the viewer. Draw some random geometric objects in an available viewport and note how the geometry displays differently in each viewport based on the scale factor selected. This exercise should help add context to the way annotative scaling manages annotative objects without affecting non-annotative objects. In our next video, we will address dimensions, dimension styles, leaders, and leader styles.